The quiet parts of the house are the hardest now. Not the loud moments. Not the arguments, not the crying. It's the ordinary silence that feels wrong. The kind of silence that used to mean peace, but now just feels like something missing. There's a corner by the door where a travel bag used to sit half-zipped, waiting. There's still an imprint in the carpet, like the floor remembers better than I do. I catch myself glancing at it sometimes, almost expecting to see it there again. It's strange, the things your mind holds onto when everything else breaks. For a long time, I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I knew what role I played in it. The steady one. The supporter. The person at home who kept things running while someone else chased something bigger. I was proud of that. Now it just feels like I was standing in the wrong story. Some mornings, I still wake up with that old instinct to check the time, to wonder if she made her flight, if she remembered her charger, if she'd text me when she landed. That instinct doesn't disappear just because the truth does. And the truth, it didn't arrive the way people imagine. It wasn't a lipstick stain or a stranger's confession. It wasn't a dramatic scene or a slammed door. It was an email. A plain, polite message that looked like every other corporate note you delete without thinking. The kind with careful wording and too many soft phrases. They said they were sorry. They offered condolences. They thanked me for understanding. At first, my brain couldn't even place what I was reading. I stared at the screen, rereading the same line over and over, waiting for it to make sense. Sorry for your loss. My hands went cold. I remember that more clearly than anything else. The physical sensation of it, like my body understood before my mind could. I called the number at the bottom immediately. I didn't even think. I just reacted. I must have sounded panicked, because the person on the other end went quiet for a second. Then they said her name carefully, like they were trying not to upset me further. And that was the moment I realized they thought she was gone. I remember gripping the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. She's not dead, I said, the words coming out rough. She's fine. She's just traveling. Another pause. Then, in a voice that shifted from sympathy into confusion, they said something that made the room tilt. Oh, they replied. I'm so sorry. We were told, she hasn't been with us for quite some time. I didn't understand. I asked what they meant. They explained, gently, that she had left the company long ago. That she'd resigned. That she hadn't been on their payroll. That they'd assumed I already knew. I laughed, just once, because it was absurd. I told them they must have the wrong person. But they didn't. I hung up and stood there, staring at nothing, listening to the refrigerator hum like it was the only thing still doing what it was supposed to. In that moment, something small and invisible shifted inside me. Not proof. Not certainty. Just discomfort. A thin crack in the glass. Because if she hadn't been working there, then where had she been going? I didn't confront her that night. I didn't even know how. I just watched her move around the house later, familiar and normal, talking about ordinary things as if nothing had changed. As if I hadn't just stepped over some invisible line. As if my life hadn't quietly begun to fracture. And I remember thinking, with a kind of dread I couldn't name yet. Once you notice something is wrong, you can't go back to not noticing. If you're drawn into stories like this, stories about trust, betrayal, and the moments that change everything, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video, because what happened next was the part of my life I still don't fully understand. And even then, I didn't know the worst part wasn't the email. It was what it made me start to see. Before any of that happened, before the email and the sick feeling that followed me around like a shadow, our life looked normal. Better than normal, honestly. We were the kind of couple people nodded at with approval. The kind that seemed steady. Responsible. Built on mutual respect. I met her when everything still felt open-ended. We weren't kids, but we were still in that stage where you believe effort can shape a future into something clean and predictable. She was ambitious from the start. Not in a loud way. Not the kind of person who bragged or demanded attention. It was quieter than that. She just always seemed to be moving toward something. A better position. A bigger opportunity. The next step. I admired it. I've always been the kind of person who finds comfort in stability. I like routines. I like knowing what tomorrow roughly looks like. Being with someone who carried that kind of drive felt exciting. Like I was standing near a fire. She talked about her work with this energy I didn't have in my own life. Not because I didn't care about what I did, but because I never saw it as a mission. For her, it was a mission. And I wanted to be the person who supported that. In the beginning, the travel was occasional. A meeting here. A conference there. A few nights away that felt reasonable. She'd pack carefully, folding things with precision, checking her phone, making lists. I'd stand nearby and ask if she needed anything. She'd smile and say, "No, I've got it." Sometimes she'd kiss me quickly, already half somewhere else mentally. I didn't resent it. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. Two people building something, even if they weren't always in the same room while doing it. When the trips became more frequent, it still made sense in the way life makes sense when you trust someone. She was advancing. She was needed. People relied on her. I was proud. I remember telling friends, she works so hard, like it was a badge we both wore. There were weekends where she left before sunrise. There were nights I ate dinner alone with the TV on low, just for noise. There were times I fell asleep with my phone beside me, waiting for a message that she'd arrived safely. And every time, she did. A short text. Made it. Long day. Miss you. That was enough. I didn't need details. I didn't want to be the kind of partner who demanded a full report, who questioned every hour. I thought trust meant giving space. And if I'm being honest, part of me liked the role I played. The steady one. The understanding one. The person who didn't make things harder. I handled things at home. I kept the schedule straight. I made sure the bills were paid. I showed up to family events alone and explained, casually, that she was away for work. People would nod sympathetically. "She's so dedicated," they'd say. And I'd agree. Sometimes I missed her so much it felt physical, like a pressure under my ribs. But I swallowed it down because I thought that was what love required. Sacrifice. Patience. Belief in the bigger picture. She'd come home with stories that sounded believable enough. Complaints about long meetings. Comments about difficult clients. Little observations about airports and hotel breakfasts. Nothing extravagant. Just normal details, the kind you don't question because questioning them would feel insane. She brought back small gifts sometimes. A snack she knew I liked. A keychain from some place I'd never been. And I'd smile, touched by the thought. Looking back, it's almost embarrassing how easily I accepted it all. But at the time, it wasn't a performance to me. It was our life. We were building something, I thought. Her career was part of that. The long hours were temporary. The distance had a purpose. That's what I told myself when I sat alone at night. That's what I told myself when she left again. I never considered the possibility that I wasn't supporting a dream. I was supporting a story. And the scariest part is, I didn't feel like a fool. I felt like a partner. Which is why, when that first crack appeared, it didn't just threaten her honesty. It threatened the foundation I'd built my entire sense of security on. Because if the sacrifices weren't real, then what exactly had I been holding together all this time? The thing about trust is that it doesn't break all at once. It wears down quietly, in places you don't think to look. For a long time, I didn't notice anything wrong because I wasn't searching for wrong. I wasn't on guard. I wasn't suspicious. I was just living. And when you're living inside something, you don't always see it clearly. At first, the changes were so small I wouldn't have even called them changes. She started coming home more tired, but not the normal kind of tired. Not the work drained me tired. It was a different heaviness, like she was carrying something she didn't want to set down. Sometimes she'd sit across from me at the kitchen table and stare at her phone longer than usual. I'd ask, "Everything okay?" And she'd look up like she'd forgotten I was there. "Yeah," she'd say quickly. "Just a lot going on." That was always the answer. A lot going on. I didn't press. I told myself it was stress. That she was overwhelmed. That I should be supportive, not needy. There were moments, though, that didn't fit as neatly. Like when she mentioned a colleague's name and then corrected herself mid-sentence, as if she'd almost said something else. Or when she'd describe a trip and her details didn't quite line up with what she'd said before. Nothing dramatic. Just, slightly off. The kind of thing you'd normally forget 5 minutes later. But my mind started holding on to them anyway. I remember one night she came back later than expected. Her flight had supposedly landed hours ago. When she walked in, she looked fine. Too fine. Not rumpled or irritated or travel-worn. Just composed. I joked, "Smooth trip?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah," she said. "Just delays." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. Another time, I was folding laundry and noticed a new piece of clothing tucked into her suitcase pocket. Something that didn't look like what she normally wore for business. I held it up without thinking. "Oh," I said. "When did you get this?" She froze for half a second. Then she laughed lightly. "It was on sale." I grabbed it. "Don't make it a thing. Don't make it a thing." That phrase stayed with me longer than it should have. Because I hadn't been making it anything. I'd been asking a simple question. And suddenly I felt like I'd crossed into territory I wasn't supposed to enter. The travel continued. The routine stayed in place. The texts still came. "Made it. Busy day. Talk soon." But the warmth in them faded. Or maybe I was just noticing the absence of something that had always been there. It's hard to explain. It wasn't that she became cruel. It was more like she became elsewhere. Even when she was sitting beside me, her attention felt divided, as if part of her was still in another room, another life, another version of herself. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself relationships shift. People get tired. Careers demand things. I even told myself I was lucky. That she was successful. That I should stop overthinking. But overthinking doesn't start in a vacuum. It starts when something inside you whispers that the story you're being told has gaps. There were nights I'd lie awake listening to her breathing, staring into the dark, trying to remember when exactly this subtle distance began. And the worst part was, I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't suspect an affair. I didn't suspect betrayal. I just felt, slightly unsafe in a way I couldn't justify. Like walking through your own home and realizing one of the pictures on the wall is crooked, and suddenly you can't stop seeing it. Then came the email. It arrived like any other message. No warning. No dramatic subject line. Just a formal tone, careful wording, and that one sentence that didn't belong in my life. "Sorry for your loss." I remember blinking at the screen, confused, annoyed even, like it was a mistake meant for someone else. But the discomfort I'd been brushing aside for months rose up instantly, sharp and cold. Because something about it felt connected. Not logically. Emotionally. Like the air shifting before a storm. I didn't know what I was about to learn. I only knew that the life I thought I understood was starting to feel unfamiliar. And once that feeling takes root, it doesn't let go. After the call, I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there in the kitchen, phone still in my hand, staring at the blank wall like it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. She hadn't worked there for over a year. The woman on the phone had been polite. Careful. Almost apologetic. Like she'd stepped into a private situation without meaning to. She resigned quite a while ago, she'd said gently. We assumed you were aware. Aware. The word echoed in my head. I went back over every trip in the last year. Every early morning departure. Every Sunday night return. Every client dinner and last-minute meeting. They hadn't been occasional. They'd been constant. And I hadn't known. I tried to construct a reasonable explanation. Maybe freelance work. Maybe a new position she hadn't mentioned yet. Maybe a misunderstanding in paperwork. But if there had been something innocent to explain it, wouldn't she have told me? I didn't confront her that evening. When she came home, she moved through the house the same way she always did after traveling. Shoes by the door. Suitcase rolled down the hallway. A quick hello, a distracted kiss on my cheek. I'm exhausted, she said. It was non-stop. I watched her. Not openly. Not aggressively. Just, carefully. Every word felt heavier now. Every gesture slightly unfamiliar. The suitcase sat on the bedroom floor, half unzipped. I stared at it longer than I should have. That bag had been a symbol of ambition. Of purpose. Of something bigger than both of us. Now it looked like a prop. I told myself I was overreacting. That I needed proof before letting my mind run wild. But proof of what? I still hadn't said the word out loud. Instead, I waited. I waited until she was in the shower, the water running steady behind the closed door. And then I crossed a line I had never crossed before. I opened the suitcase. My hands were shaking, not because I expected to find something dramatic, but because I knew that if I did, I would never be able to go back to the version of myself who trusted without hesitation. The clothes inside were folded neatly. Not business wear. Not what she used to pack for meetings. There were things that didn't belong to the story I'd been told. Softer fabrics. Different choices. Pieces I had never seen her wear around me. My chest tightened. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but the absence of what should have been there felt louder than any obvious evidence. No documents. No materials. No signs of work. Just, personal things. Carefully selected. I sat back on the edge of the bed, staring at the open suitcase like it might explain itself. Maybe she changed her style. Maybe she stopped needing paperwork. Maybe I was building something ugly out of nothing. The water shut off. I quickly zipped the bag closed, placing it exactly where it had been. When she stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair, she looked at me and smiled faintly. You okay? She asked. And for a split second, I considered saying yes. I considered burying the entire thing. Pretending I hadn't made the call. Pretending I hadn't opened the bag. Pretending I hadn't noticed the shift months ago. But something inside me had already shifted. Not anger. Not even certainty. Just awareness. A quiet understanding that the life I thought I was participating in might have been staged. That I might have been supporting something that didn't exist. I nodded slowly and said, yeah. Just tired. She accepted that answer easily. Too easily. And as she turned away, moving around the room like everything was intact, I realized the most unsettling part wasn't what I'd found. It was how natural she looked inside a reality that no longer made sense to me. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't just questioning her schedule. I was questioning who she was when she walked out that door. And whether the person who came back was ever fully mine to begin with. I didn't confront her right away. People think betrayal comes with fireworks. A screaming match. A dramatic confession. A moment where everything explodes and the truth spills out in one clean line. That wasn't how it happened for us. It was slower. It was me carrying this knowledge around like a weight I didn't know where to set down. For days after the call, I moved through our life like someone walking through fog. I watched her pack. I listened to her talk about work. I nodded at the right moments. And every time she said something ordinary, something familiar, it felt like hearing a language I used to speak fluently but suddenly didn't trust. The distance between us wasn't physical. It was reality itself. I started noticing patterns I hadn't wanted to see before. How she always left with the same practiced confidence. How she never seemed flustered, even when plans supposedly changed last minute. How she guarded her phone without making it obvious, like a person who'd rehearsed the motion enough times that it looked natural. I hated myself for looking. I hated that I couldn't stop. One evening, she came home later than expected again. She set her bag down, sighed, and said, "I swear, it never ends." Something in me snapped, not loudly, not violently, just quietly. I said, "Can we talk?" She paused, her hand still on the zipper. About what? My throat felt tight. I tried to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to accuse. I didn't even know how to begin. "I got an email," I said. Her face didn't change much. Just a small flicker, like a curtain shifting. "An email from who?" I watched her carefully. "From your company." The air in the room changed. Not dramatically. Just, subtly. She blinked. "Oh," she said. "Why would they email you?" I swallowed. "They said they were sorry." That was the first time her expression truly faltered. A crease appeared between her brows. "Sorry," she repeated, like she didn't understand the word. "They thought something happened to you," I said. "They thought I'd lost you." She let out a short laugh, but it was thin. "That's ridiculous." I nodded slowly. "It is." Silence stretched between us. Then I said the sentence I'd been holding inside for days. "They told me you haven't worked there for a long time." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For a moment, she looked like someone caught in headlights, not panicked, exactly, but frozen. "I don't know what they told you," she said carefully. "They told me you resigned over a year ago." I heard my own voice sounding distant, like it belonged to someone else. She stared at me. The room felt too still. Finally, she exhaled and sat down heavily on the edge of the couch. "I was going to tell you," she said. I waited. But nothing followed. I asked, quietly, "When?" She rubbed her forehead. It wasn't the right time." "The right time," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of it. She looked up at me, eyes glossy but controlled. "I didn't want you to worry." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "I wasn't worried," I said. "I was proud of you. I supported everything. I built my life around it." Her voice softened. "I know." And that softness, that familiarity, almost made me lose my grip on what I was asking. Almost. I took a breath. "If you weren't working there, where were you going?" The question hung between us like a blade. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes dropped to the floor. And in that silence, I felt something terrible settle into place. Not proof. Not details. Just inevitability. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. The words landed like an insult. I stared at her. That's what you say? My voice cracked. That you didn't want to hurt me? She flinched. It wasn't that simple. It was simple, I said. You left. You lied. You came home and looked me in the eye. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks, but her tone stayed measured, almost practiced. I didn't know how to stop once it started. Once it started. My stomach turned. So it did start, I said. She pressed her lips together. I felt dizzy, like the floor had shifted under me. How long? I asked. She shook her head quickly. I can't, please. I cut her off, not shouting, just firm. Don't do that. Don't ask me to protect you right now. Her shoulders trembled. I never meant for it to become this. This? I echoed. An entire second life? She looked up then, and for a moment I saw something I didn't recognize. Not guilt. Not love. Something split. Like there were two versions of her sitting in front of me, layered over each other. The woman I married, who laughed with me in grocery store aisles, who fell asleep with her feet tangled in mine. And someone else. Someone who could pack a suitcase and disappear into a story I wasn't part of. I whispered, almost to myself, who have I been living with? She sobbed quietly, covering her face. I didn't want to lose you, she said. I let out a hollow laugh. You already did, I said. And the most devastating part was realizing it wasn't one betrayal. It was hundreds. Every goodbye at the door. Every text from a hotel room. Every time I told myself love meant trust, while she built a world where I didn't exist. I wasn't married to one person. I was married to two versions. And neither of them was fully honest. That night, we sat in the same room, surrounded by the life we'd built, and it felt like I was seeing it for the first time. Not as a home. But as a stage. After that night, nothing was loud. There was no dramatic ending. No suitcase thrown out the door. No sudden clean break where the world makes sense again. There was just this slow collapse. Like a building you've lived in for years, only to discover the foundation has been cracked the whole time. We moved around each other carefully in the days that followed. She slept. I didn't. She tried to speak. I couldn't always answer. Sometimes she would sit at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from, staring into the space between us like she could find the right words hiding there. Sometimes she whispered, "I'm sorry." And sometimes I believed she meant it. But meaning it didn't undo it. I kept replaying everything. Not just the last year, but the entire shape of our relationship. Every memory became suspicious. A weekend we'd laughed together, was that real, or was she already elsewhere in her mind? A birthday dinner she seemed distracted during, was that guilt, or exhaustion from something she hadn't told me? Even ordinary moments felt contaminated. It was like someone had taken a highlighter to my life and marked all the places where I might have been the only one fully present. I found myself obsessing over details that never mattered before. Receipts. Dates. Little phrases she used. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because my brain was trying to rebuild reality from scraps. I couldn't stand the not knowing. The betrayal wasn't just what she did. It was the way she did it alongside me. The way she came home and asked about my day. The way she kissed me goodbye. The way she let me be proud of her. I started questioning myself in ways I didn't expect. How did I not see it? Was I naive? Was I willfully blind because the story benefited me too, because it made me feel needed? I'd always thought of myself as steady. Reasonable. Hard to fool. Now I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Friends noticed something was wrong, of course. They asked careful questions. You okay? You seem tired. I lied without thinking. Just stress. Because what do you say? My partner built an entire second identity and I didn't notice until an accident of paperwork cracked it open. It felt humiliating. Not because of what she'd done, but because of what it made me realize about my place in my own life. At night, the house felt different. Not haunted. Just unfamiliar. I'd lie in bed listening to her breathing and feel the distance between us like an ocean. Sometimes she would reach for my hand, hesitating. And I would freeze, unsure what her touch meant anymore. Touch used to be comfort. Now it felt like a question. I thought about the person she had been when she left the house. I thought about the version of her that existed somewhere I couldn't see. And worst of all, I thought about the version of me that stayed behind, believing. There's a particular kind of grief that comes from realizing you weren't just betrayed. You were edited out. Like your role was never what you thought it was. Our shared history started to feel like a book I'd read once, only to discover half the pages were rewritten when I wasn't looking. I wanted answers. I wanted explanations. But every explanation felt thin. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop. I was afraid. Fear didn't build hotel rooms. Fear didn't pack bags. Fear didn't create routines so smooth they became invisible. That took intention. That took practice. That took a kind of separation inside her that I couldn't understand. And maybe that was the hardest part. I wasn't just grieving the relationship. I was grieving the version of myself who thought love made you safe. Because once trust breaks like that, it doesn't just change how you see them. It changes how you see everything you ever believed was real. It didn't hit all at once. The clarity, I mean. In the beginning, I kept thinking there would be one perfect conversation that would explain everything. One missing piece that would make it make sense. But betrayal like that doesn't resolve neatly. It just echoes. It was only later, after the shock dulled into something quieter, that I started to understand what had really happened. Not the details. The shape of it. This wasn't one mistake. It was a system. A routine built carefully enough that it could survive next to ordinary life. That was what finally settled in my chest. She didn't just lie once. She lived inside the lie. And she let me live beside it. I began to see how often I'd been asked to accept less without realizing it. How often I'd made myself small to make room for her life. How pride had turned into obligation. How support had turned into silence. I stopped asking what I could have done differently, because the truth was, I couldn't have loved her into honesty. Honesty was a choice she didn't make. And the longer I sat with that, the more I realized something else, too. The second life she built wasn't proof that I was unworthy. It was proof that she was capable of separation I didn't understand. That kind of deception doesn't come from love. It comes from avoidance. From protecting yourself at someone else's expense. And slowly, painfully, I started reclaiming pieces of myself that had been waiting in the background. The part of me that trusted my instincts. The part of me that didn't need to earn truth through patience. The part of me that deserved to be in a life that wasn't staged. If you've ever ignored that quiet feeling that something was off, or if you've ever trusted someone who made you doubt your own reality, take a second to subscribe, like, and comment. I read every story people share, and you're not alone in this. Because sometimes the betrayal isn't just what someone did. It's what they convinced you was normal. And once you finally see that, you can't unsee it. I still think about ordinary things more than the big ones. Not the hotel rooms I never saw. Not the places she went. Just the small rituals that used to feel solid. The sound of keys at the door. The way I'd look up automatically, expecting the life I believed in to walk back inside. Those moments are different now. Not because they're painful every time, but because they remind me how easily a person can live in confirmation while someone else lives in concealment. People ask questions when they hear something like this. They want a villain. They want a clear reason. They want to know if she felt guilty, if she suffered, if she ever planned to stop. And maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. What I know is that she said, "I didn't want to hurt you," as if the lie was mercy. As if deception was protection. But I keep coming back to the same thought. If you have to build an entire second self to avoid telling the truth, who are you protecting? The person you claim to love? Or the version of yourself that doesn't want consequences? That's the moral knot I still can't untangle. Because the affair, the betrayal, the hidden life, those are terrible. But the part that lingers is the normalcy. The rehearsed mornings. The practiced goodbyes. The way someone can look you in the eye and still be elsewhere. So I'll leave you with this. What is the greater betrayal? The act itself? Or the years of ordinary life that were never fully real? If this story stayed with you, make sure to subscribe, like, and share the video. These are the stories that live in silence the longest, and you never know who needs to hear they're not crazy for noticing the cracks. Because once you see the truth, you don't go back.